Colorspace. Oftentimes in digital photography nowadays, our newer digital cameras have the ability to change color spaces. So I want to kind of briefly go over Colorspace and why it's important. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. Here's a Canon Mark 5D. And if I go into the menu, I have the ability to go in here and choose Colorspace. And I have the ability to use sRGB or Adobe RGB. So, what I'm going to do is show you the difference between these two color spaces and which one is the best for prints. Prints. Before I go into sRGB, I want to show you the value of what I'm about to show you. So, Sam's Club. Sam's Club, you can go out there and upload a photo to Sam's Club and have it printed out for practically, like an 8x10 for about $1. Okay, $1. Now, consider the cost of that $1 for an 8x10 corresponding to going out, buying a printer, buying the ink for the printer, and when the ink falls out, you're going to end up buying the ink again for about $75 to $80 on a good photo printer. Okay. So the problem with this is I don't know what color space to put things in. Okay? Until I go to Sam's Club and say, hey, what color space are you using? And they'll answer sRGB. So I know they're using sRGB instead of Adobe 1998 or Adobe RGB. So here I got a photo, and in the photo, what I want to do is kind of look at its color space. So if I go to my window and I go to info, and then I click here on my info button, I got panel options, and I can go in here to say document profile and hit OK. Sure enough, this is in sRGB. Now that doesn't mean it has to stay in sRGB until the very, like I can play around with the color space a little bit and then put it back into sRGB. That's fine, as long as it goes back into sRGB. Now keep this in mind. There's a lot of color spaces in Photoshop. Okay, one being my favorite. We'll go into that later. Lab, and what Lab does is allow you to see imaginary colors. So I might do something a little whacked out and go in here and say, well, maybe I want to take my curves and adjust my curves in some manner on the A and B channel of color. Again, this is for later lessons, and I'll give you the example of why Lab is so much more powerful than sRGB and RGB put together. But I'll make these rich tones. And I'll make it super contrasty and do some other stuff in here like Smart Sharpen. There we go. Now if you see, I have Lab Color 8, okay, standing for 8-bit. Now I can go back to RGB Color, and to check if it makes sure if it's sRGB, I can look here. And if I had it in Adobe, I could always go in, tweak the color, and I can also go into Assign Profile and assign it sRGB or any other profile. And you see, this is the confusing part. There's a lot of profiles. Okay, so that's what I'm going to show you in the next video on the difference between the RGB and sRGB, and a little bit of CMYK also. So you can see this has got some really good color, some differentiation between what it used to, and here's just to kind of show you what it used to look like. I can go into the history of it, and then I can toggle it on and off. Okay, dull color, bright color. Alright, so that's it for this video. Go on to the next where I give you the explanation between the two color spaces.